Story 1. The cabin. A hiker decided to go on a hike by himself, something he was not very used to. The whole day was normal, trees and bushes engulfed his surroundings. He enjoyed being outdoors in the mountains. Nothing seemed strange to him. That was until he was making his way back to his car. He figured an 8-hour hike was good enough. The sky was already getting dark, and he needed to get back fast. What was odd was how much he didn't recognize the trail back. He began to panic. Night had already taken over, and all he had was a flashlight and no clue on how to get back. He knew it was already too late and dangerous to keep going through the perilous forest. He began to worry that he would have no shelter for the night when, almost luckily enough, he stumbled across a broken-down cabin. It was dark and seemed like no one had visited it in years, but he knew it was the only place where he could rest until daylight, especially since his flashlight was running out of battery. He knocked on the door a few times, but no one answered. So he let himself in where, strangely enough, a perfect bed fitted for one person awaited him in the center. He knew that if the owner came back, he could explain himself. He was sure that the owner wouldn't mind, or was even probably dead. So he went ahead and got himself comfortable in bed. As he tried to sleep, he couldn't ignore the collection of paintings around the room. Portraits of strange-looking people all peering at him, each wearing a smile that sent chills up his spine. Not too long after his exhaustion from the hike got the best of him, and he was able to ignore the faces, the next morning he got up early and was shocked to see that there were no paintings around the room but windows. Story 2. What the Forest Wants. Each bump of the road set pain clawing through my lower back. The heating pad buzzed against me like a dying insect, useless against the cramps that had dug their hooks in deep. I shifted in the passenger seat, hunting for comfort in Ryan's 2001 Hyundai, but there was none, not with the back seat suffocating under tents, tarps, and enough trail mix to feed an army. "Almost there," Ryan said when I asked, though his voice bent with irritation. Out of half-closed eyes, I watched him stab at the screen of his phone. The map glitched, the car icon spinning in useless circles, the image flickering like a bad transmission. Right, just what we needed. My uterus twisted sharper, and I curled into a ball in my seat. This trip was supposed to be rescheduled. A fleece blanket, junk food, and sitcom reruns had been the plan. My plan. Instead, Ryan had insisted. The meteor shower, the one chance in our lifetime, blah, blah, cosmic wonder. So here I was, in pain, in the wrong season, heading who knows where with a man who thought cramps were a footnote. I should have said no. I should have been more adamant, but I caved because I knew he had been looking forward to taking time off from work, because I couldn't stand to see him disappointed, and because I had felt him start to pull away when I said I love you. And he didn't. The phone screen blinked once more. The car icon began to move, but the map it followed was different. The route twisted and wound deep through the woods. I mentioned it to Ryan, and in a tone that didn't tiptoe around my feelings. He told me it was the same one he had put in at the beginning. NG. But it wasn't. I know what I had first seen when he typed in the address. The glitch might have messed up the coordinates I offered as an explanation, but he kept his eyes on the road ahead. His hand gripped the steering wheel tightly. As the first sharp turn came up, he narrowly avoided launching us off the cliffside. "We're lucky you're not behind the wheel. In your condition, we'd be at the bottom of the mountain." There was no amusement in his voice as he forced a chuckle. My anger bloomed from my gut. No, it was a bit lower, and that. What the fuck did he mean by my sea? Audition, I wanted him to explain himself. But as the question traveled up my throat and arrived at my lips, it refused to leave. With a sharp gasp, I swallowed the words instead. They squirmed in my stomach. "Hawk as they die," Ryan went on, musing over the lush landscape and touch, considering all the wildfires. He wondered out loud, more to himself than to me, how something so beautiful could exist in such glory for so long. A story whispered to me from memory, or was it coming from the woods outside? A tale of the first people of these lands who believed that certain spirits and gods protected the forest, feeding it, keeping it alive. Ryan laughed loudly and harshly, too much so to be sincere. He mocked that I was too old to believe in fairy tales, that my hormones must be affecting my intelligence. The fog rushed toward us, swallowing everything into silence. Leaning forward to peer out, I couldn't tell where the road ended and the forest continued. Ryan remained unchanged until the GPS voice told him to turn right, and he did. The volume icon on the app was crossed out in red. "Isn't it beautiful?" he had asked as he jumped out of the car, without waiting for a reply. The towering pines looming overhead still held on to their needles, but the others, the smaller ones that circled the campsite, stood half undressed in skirts of crimson and gold leaves. Their branches, twisted and knotted, reached for the car. I was unable to move as they peered at me. I shut my eyes. My name whispered from among them, and the door swung open. "What's gotten into you?" Ryan asked as he riffled through the back seat. Another rhetorical question. Burning bile rose up my throat, and I barely managed to exit the car before it filled my mouth. It as acidic, bitter, metallic. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and pushed it down, taking in deep breaths to soothe my upset stomach. The more I inhaled, the worse I felt. The air was THICK. It choked as it went into my lungs, squeezing them. It had the scent of pines, earth, and something else, something rotting and decaying beneath it. Something that was writhing in my stomach. Something, I could not keep inside of me. From between the trees, I doubled over, and a rush of viscous vomit shot from my mouth. It was putrid, like death leaving my soul. It was the same scent that was lingering in the air. The forest floor absorbed it too fast. As if it was thirsty, it all disappeared. Every last bit was gone, swallowed up. "You're not about to puke all weekend, are you?" Ryan shouted, his voice sharp, accusatory, like I was doing it to spite him. I fell to my knees and dug through the dirt. Small rocks and twigs stabbed and poked through my nail beds as I pulled at the ground, but there was nothing. I had thrown up, hadn't I? No birds were chirping. No leaves were rustling. My own heartbeat had fallen silent. Staring at my filthy hands, I laughed softly at myself, at the state of my clothes, at the pain burrowing itself in my pelvis, like tree root spreading. "Can you come out here and help me with this?" Ryan cursed as he struggled with the tent. The swishing of the plastic filled the campsite. "I'm not feeling that great." "Once the tent is set up, you can rest and sigh. Now pull on that sigh." Everything I did was wrong and not done the way he had instructed. I apologized, said I must have misheard or not understood, as I squatted with my knees hugged to my chest. He huffed and stomped over to do it right. Blah. Ring at me, mumbling under his breath that I was doing it on purpose. Anger would build in that pit inside of me, but I would inhale, and the thick forest air smothered it. The sun dipped low, and the trees moved in closer. Their branches reached for my hair and clothes when I wasn't looking. I'd swat at them with my hand, but they were persistent. There's bug spray in the glove box, Ryan said, then added with a derisive laugh, the mosquitoes must be able to smell your blood. I know I can. Grab the air freshener, too. I glared at him with tears brimming on the edge of my eyes, but he didn't see them. I slammed the car door after, retrieving the items. The noise vibrated in the air, and the trees shook and groaned. Ryan grabbed his backpack and told me there was a spot above the fog, a quick hike to see the sunset. I went to the car again to grab my hiking backpack, but Ryan was already deep in the forest when I turned around. I won't be able to see it before dark if you tag along. Just stay here and get the food ready for dinner, was his response. Said too loud, too fast, too dismissive. And then he was gone, swallowed up in the fog. His desire to be away from me lingered long after he was gone. It whispered back to me from the dead leaves blowing in the chill wind. Sometimes I thought it was the trees themselves, calling to me to follow. To unbury, to burn, with fumbling fingers I put my earbuds in. Music would soothe me and silence them. The songs muted the forest, but they didn't quiet my thoughts. They were tender, too. My anger, they surfaced from that pit deep inside and rose like smoke up into my chest. Sure, I wasn't feeling well, but he could have waited until tomorrow. There'd be another sunset then. I have put so much effort into being here, even when I feel like shit. Hot tears burned and blurred my eyes. I opened my mouth to yell, to scream, to release the fire that had been building inside of me. But reason came in at the last second. It would scare him. It would make him worrying. It would upset him if he heard it. I picked up two rocks and threw them instead, hurled them as far as I could on. He bounced off the ground and rolled deep into the woods. The other had hit a tree. I felt it when it made contact. Felt the thud deep in my lower stomach. The music cut out, and I heard the T's growl. The nausea returned, and I fell to my knees, heaving. Roots, gnarled, black, and wet, slithered from my mouth. Gasping, they slid back down. I ran to the car, unable to move into the tent where I couldn't see the trees. The fog thickened around me, and then I heard it, slow, heavy, and like something being dragged across the dirt. I pressed down on the door lock each time I heard it get closer. A shadow emerged from the fog. Tall, like a walking tree, it drew nearer, and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Something clawed in my stomach. I opened my mouth to ask Reem, but all that came out was a gurgling noise, and then words that were not my own. It turned toward me and walked out from beneath the pines. It wore a white dress, tattered and stained. Its arms were thin and long, the veins on them protruding and twisting like tree roots. Long, tangled, dark hair fell down its shoulders from the skull of an antlered beast with red, sticky flesh peeling off the bone. My heart beat in my womb. Its long hand scraped against the passenger window as it stared at me. Black voice peered into my soul. The car locks clicked open. To hands grip my arms, hard and tight enough to bruise, trapping me. "What the hell are you doing in here?" Ryan's voice demanded. I thrust myself into his arms and hugged him fiercely. It was ... I searched for the right word to describe, to make him understand. A monster, I finally admitted, struggling with the pain that coiled deeper and tighter inside of me. There was no sympathy in his gaze, no understanding, only anger and frustration. He pushed me away hard. "I know you don't believe me, but you always do this. I don't care now why I thought you would act differently on this trip." He was pacing, a silhouette in the fog, a storm brewing. "You didn't even bring down any of the food, so now I have to do it. Like everything else today. You're not listening to me. This thing appeared and, oh, enough. I get that you aren't feeling well because it's that time. But now your hormones make you see beasts." He was fuming. I paused, and thought of what I had said to him, a monster. Maybe if I described what I saw, he'd hear me out. But as soon as the image flashed across my mind again, I doubted. Had I really seen it? Or can pain make you hallucinate? Moving slowly, back-bent as it felt like my tubes were twisting around my uterus, I got out of the car and began to set up the propane stove. "You're really milking that AR at you?" He ripped the items from my hands and finished setting up. Every movement he made was sharp, quick, loud as he tore packages open, slammed pans, and slapped the food together. "Are you in too much pain to serve yourself?" Shuffling over to the fire, I made my own plate. I wanted to be angry, to scream at him, to throw things at him. But my hips throbbed, my back ached, and my legs felt too heavy as I ate. Tears salted each bite, and out of the corner of my eyes I saw the trees moving in closer. Night chased us inside the tent. I curled on my side, my sleeping bag wrapped closely around me. The electric heating pad buzzed faintly as the battery waned. Ryan's attention was on his phone, zooming in and out of the map, a puzzled expression on his face and mumbling that none of the spots he had wanted to see were appearing. All the highlights, all the trails, everything was gone. I mentioned the glitch from the drive, but he didn't answer. I heard the trees whispering outside, saw their branches poking through the fabric, trying to grab me. Curling deeper into the sleeping bag, I felt a rush of warmth fill my underwear. Shaking, I sat up, and he hugged my middle. In a low, pleading voice, I asked Ryan to accompany me outside. I needed to change. He repeated the word change, as though not understanding what I meant. "Did ye?" And through my bag, I pulled out a tampon and showed it to him. "I'm really comfortable right now. Besides, you don't need my help to change, do you?" The flame inside leapt. "Something," Hot answered low in me, a wildfire I'd been smothering all day. "You're being such a dick." I spat, all venom. "It's dark and scary out there. Is it that much of a bother to stand and keep watch? You want me to be inconvenienced over something that happens to you every month? Helping with someone's pain isn't an inconvenience. If you love them." His lips formed a straight line as he looked away from me, gazed back on his phone. "You're an asshole." In my haste, I hadn't grabbed a headlamp. Changing a tampon while wearing several layers of clothing proved difficult. I knew I was going to end up with stains. The cold, foggy night hit my bare skin, sending chills across my body. I felt the trees reaching for me again. I rushed to insert the new tampon and felt warm blood cover my fingers. The used one fell to the ground. I made a note to find it in the morning. If the forest floor hadn't swallowed it up by then, the fog retreated. I felt it rush past me, but there was no wind. Then I saw it again. It walked out from the deep shadows between the trees. It was limping as its long arms dragged behind it, but it made no noise. I froze, pants still around my ankles. It didn't see me, though. It kept its gaze on the tent. Its hand reached toward the tent entrance, toward Ryan. I screamed, but the noise gurgled, and out came words. It felt ancient as they passed through my lips. It turned its head and looked right at me. I scrambled back, twigs and leaves scratching the exposed skin on my thighs as I hurriedly tried to dress to run away. Rough, wet roots slithered up my legs and arms, pulling me up until I was hovering above the ground. With its thorny, sharp finger, it pierced into my stomach. No, it was lower. It was digging into my womb. Pain exploded throughout my whole body, and I felt warm blood spilling like rivers down my legs. I screamed louder. The old words filled the forest, and with each syllable, my pain ebbed away. What had been tearing, ripping, and clawing inside of me was flowing out. The roots lowered me to the ground and gently wrapped around me, squeezing, tightening, hugging. And there were more of them. They circled the tent, all in white dresses, long tangled hair down their backs. They repeated the exact words that were still coming from my mouth. They chanted, they sang, and Ryan screamed. He yelled for them to stop, to let him go, and when they didn't, then did he say my name. He begged me for help. He pleaded for the love that I'd help him. The roots grew hot around me. I fed them the heat that had been ravaging my insides. His cries filled the night as a sudden white fire engulfed the tent. I watched, completely emptied. I felt nothing as it all burned. I was now hollow cold. The flames danced and leapt as they grew larger, never outward, only upward. I turned my gaze toward the sky. They reached for and saw falling stars. Story 3. Cell 13. The children were safe and secure in their cells. John Bagley studied the security monitor, scanning the camera feeds, careful not to linger on any individual for too long. He didn't want to risk them noticing. You're early. John Bagley spun in his desk chair, turning to face the man. You say that as if it's a bad thing. God, no, the sooner I get this handover done, the sooner I can go home, the man said. His white shirt clung to his gut. Tattoos crawled out from his sleeves. He licked his lips, eyes shifting briefly to the monitors. It's been a long shift, as long as every other shift. John leaned back, chair creaking. He'd met the man a handful of times, though never bothered learning his name. Right, the man braced, a hand on the desk, keeping his back to the monitors. All 12 are secure. The new one came about an hour ago. The priest is with her now. John leaned forward. A new one. Do we have a file? Not yet, but she. He stopped, rubbing the back of his neck. She's different. Almost nice. Looks can be deceiving. Yeah, I know. He gave a half nod. It's just sometimes I wonder if there's anything left in there. John had wondered this himself when he was new to the job, but after 17 years, experience had taught him everything he needed to know. There is nothing. Everything they say, everything they do. It's all an act." John paused. The words hung in the air. Then he added, "Best not to think about it. You're right to Maness. Too, you don't mind if I head off early, do you? Should make it in time for kickoff." "Not at all." "Who's playing?" John asked. He'd learned that showing a vague interest in others helped make him more ickable. At least that's what Confidence on YouTube had told him. Rangers. At home, big one. Oh, it meant nothing to John. Enjoyed the man's smile, loosening his tie as he left. He would quit, John was certain. Most people did. John turned back to the desk. He pulled a cloth from the drawer and wiped away the coffee ring that had been left, straightened the clipboard and adjusted the twin monitors until they were in perfect alignment. Tomorrow morning, Dr. Helena Voss would arrive at the facility for an inspection. The same Helena Voss who'd written to John personally last year, praising him for his suggestions to the safety protocols. His facility had the lowest recorded incidents worldwide. The lowest. He'd read the letter so many times the crease in the paper had gone soft. Now she was coming, and everything needed to be perfect. Maybe then she would approve of his transfer request to Paris. A fresh start. No more eating dinner alone. No more cycling through Scottish rain with only the midges for company. In Paris, he could ride along the Seine, practice his French at cafes, maybe even make some friends. He straightened the clipboard one more time. The monitor flickered. John reached behind it, jiggling the HDMI cable. It must have come loose when he'd adjusted the screen. At 1:15 a.m., Father Graham appeared in the doorway. He carried the particular wariness of a man who'd seen too many terrible things. Despite his age, he showed no signs of retiring. "John Th. Ought I'd check in before I left, Father." He nodded and stood to offer the priest his chair. "Thank you." Father Graham sat slowly, his vestments rustling. How was she? Responsive, articulate, curious. He paused. "If I didn't know better, I'd say she was a very bright and very frightened young girl. But you do know better." "I do." Father Graham's expression darkened. "Demons are patient." John nodded. "How's your French coming along?" "Bonjour, je m'appelle John. Tu vas bien." "You're getting better. I'll pray you get your transfer, though I must admit your presence will be missed. You've done good work here." He glanced at the clock. "Is that the time?" "I hadn't realized I'd been in there that long." He stood, but paused at the door. "Oh, before I forget, I noticed the Bible was missing from her room. Destroyed already?" Father Graham pursed his lips. "I'm not sure. I believe the room was prepared. In haste, it could have been forgotten. I'll see to it. Good night, Father." After the priest left, John pulled out his flask of coffee, removing the lid to let it cool. Then what? Ched the monitors, 12 cells, all occupied with children. They didn't age, didn't eat or drink, didn't feel the cold, didn't need to sleep, though some chose to. The new Arive was much older than the others. She paced the small room, arms folded. John pulled up the intake details. Name: Emily Canty. Age: 16. Origin: France. Moved to England 5 years ago. Currently residing in Birmingham. Refer Father Michael's following. A failed exorcism. Full report currently unavailable. His teeth ground together. Michael's. barely ordained 3 years, constantly cutting corners. No wonder the exorcism had failed. Had he been too keen to put the girl here? He could be waiting all night for Michaels to publish his full report. Perhaps he could get some. He answers himself. John stood, picking up his jacket. The facility ran cold despite the new heating system. 2 additional heaters made the office bearable, but in the corridors, John wore his C-oat. He pushed through the first set of security doors, the lock buzzing as it released, then the second. The heavy doors thudded shut behind him, sealing him into the cell block. The corridors are stretched 116 paces. He counted them every time, fluorescent lights humming overhead. His footsteps echoed, and for a brief moment it sounded as if someone walked behind him. John ignored this, not giving whichever demon was playing tricks the satisfaction of acknowledgment. A high-pitched wail rose from cell 2. It shifted into a laugh, deep and guttural. That was Ellie. She was 3. She still looked the same as she had in John's first week. Cell 13 sat at the end of the corridor. The door was solid steel with a reinforced window, tie-level, and an intercom fit. Beside it, John approached, breath fogging in the cold. He fixed himself in front of the window and looked in. Emily Canty sat on the edge of a narrow bed, shoulders curled inward, arms wrapped tight around herself. She wore a gray tracksuit, standard issue, and her right foot tapped against the floor. John pressed the intercom button. "Good evening." She looked up, startled. Her dark cornrows had started to fray at her temple, a small sore under her eye. "Who are you?" "You can call me Mr. Bagley." "What may I call you?" Emily, Joe. Etienne repeated, "But you're not Emily, are you?" "Who am I really speaking to?" Her jaw tightened. "Why do you people keep—" She cut herself off, folding her legs in close, exhaustion stark around her eyes. "I'm not a monster." John felt an instinct to comfort her. He pushed it away. "I know you spoke with Father Graham earlier, but if you have any other questions, now's your opportunity when can. I see my parents. That's not going to happen. You know that." She pressed her lips, but didn't argue. "Can I have a blanket? It's freezing." They didn't feel the cold. "I'm afraid I can't bring you anything." "Why not?" "That's the rules. I can't enter on my own." "Why?" "Because I'm dangerous." There was something raw in her voice. Fear, maybe. "Are you done?" "Cheris." She didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to her hands. The silence stretched between them. John found himself wanting to fill it. "What happened to your Bible? I don't see it on the shelf." She turned to look, scanning the sparse room, shrug. "Maybe she didn't get one after all. I'll make sure one is brought to you in the morning." "And a blanket?" John sighed. "And a blanket." John made to leave, but then remembered something. "From her file notes, you grew up in France?" he asked. She looked up, surprised by the question. "Yes." A flicker of something, hope, maybe, crossed her face. "What else do you know about me?" "Not much. Can you still speak French?" "Le pape est Catholic." John's brow furrowed. "Le pape, the Pope, est Catholic, is Catholic?" He bristled at the blasphemy. "Yes, sir. Le pape lest," John said. The words came to him with surprising ease. Something inside him lit up. He'd never practiced with another person before, even if she wasn't technically a person. "Not bad. Have you ever been to France?" Careful. He wasn't supposed to answer personal questions. He hesitated, then said, I haven't been, though I hope to visit Paris one day. Paris is beautiful. I miss it." The sadness in her eyes appeared genuine. He had to remind himself that it wasn't real. An idea struck him, a test. "Quis custodi et ipsos custodes," he said, keeping his tone casual. He'd hoped to trick the demon into replying in Latin. The phrase was something he'd picked up from Father Graham. It's translationed, "Who will guard the guards themselves?" She blinked at him, puzzled. What was that? Never mind. "I jumbled my words," John said. "It was worth a go." "You're a bit weird, aren't you?" Something in John's chest tightened. "My friends thought I was weird, too," she said. "I had 3 real friends, Emily, Thomas, and Connie. We'd meet at this cafe every Saturday and just talk for hours." Her eyes glisten. "Do you think they know I'm here? Do they think I'm a monster?" John found himself leaning closer to the intercom. For a moment, just a moment, he saw a 16-year-old girl who'd lost everything, but she wasn't a girl. She was a demon. "I've got to go now." "I'm sorry. I have to check on the other children." Her eyes widened. She looked afraid. John turned and walked away. Behind him, through the reinforced glass, he thought he heard her say something else. But he was already walking back, down the corridor, counting his paces. 116. Always 116. When John returned to the office, he pulled up the inventory records on the computer. As he read through them, his mind drifted back to cell 13 and the sadness in her eyes. When she'd mentioned her friends, what if she's been put there by mistake? Stop it. He forced himself to focus. The Bible. Father Graham had said it was missing. He hadn't seen it in her room. He scanned the delivery list. Bedding delivered. Clothing delivered. Cup delivered. Bible missing. The tattooed man must have forgotten to include it. Careless, sacred objects were required in every cell. Their presence constrained the entities, or so the theory went. John made a note on his computer. He would retrieve a Bible from supply in the morning. At least then it would be ready to issue with the day shift. But what if Dr. Voss arrived before the day shift? What if she discovered the Bible was missing? He imagined her walking the corridor, checking each cell, finding cell 13 incomplete, the disappointment in her eyes, the chance of a transfer to Paris evaporating. Nothing could be out of plan. See, he checked his watch. To 47 a.m. He could retrieve it now. Quick trip to supply. 5 minutes, maybe 10. No, that would be against protocol. His protocol, which woe irked. Behind him, orange light flickered at the edge of his vision. John turned. His coat, draped over the back of his chair, was smoking where it touched the heater. He didn't remember leaving it there. He always put it on the hook where it belonged. He grabbed it, yanked it away, and threw it on the floor. He stamped on it once, twice. Smoke curled up between his feet. He dumped his cold coffee on the smoldering patch. It hissed. John unplugged the heater. He hung his coat on the proper hook, then returned to his desk. The Bible. He should get the Bible. That's what he decided. The supply closet was on the ground floor, past the cell block, through 2 more security doors. The corridor here was older. The paint yellowed and cracked. They'd innovated the cell block 5 years ago, but this section remained untouched. Budget constraints. John unlocked the door and stepped inside. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with linens, CL, cleaning supplies, toiletries, and in the back corner, a box of Bibles, standard issue, leather-bound, King James, the good book. He pulled one from the box, marking it off on the inventor. White clipboard. Something creaked behind him. John, still listening the door, he called out of the storeroom. His voice sounded strange in the enclosed space, muffled. No response. Of course, no response. He was alone in a supply closet at 3:17 a.m., jumping at shadows like a child afraid of the dark. John tucked the Bible under his arm and left, pulling the door firmly shut. The lock engaged with a solid click. He walked back toward the stairwell, refusing to hurry, refusing to look back. But in his peripheral vision, he could swear he saw something move. At 3:47 a.m., John found himself outside cell 13. Bible in hand, he couldn't remember walking here. He'd left the storeroom, reached the stairwell, and now he was here just exhausted. He told himself. The caffeine withdrawal wasn't helping after he'd used his coffee to douse his jacket. Through the window, he could see Emily in the same position, sitting on the steel-framed bed. John's hand moved to the door lock. He stopped, remembering his own words from his protocol: never enter a cell alone, under any circumstances, for any reason. But he wasn't entering. Was he just opening the door, delivering required materials, then leaving? The Bible was required. Dr. Voss was coming tomorrow. Everything had to be perfect. His hand completed TH. He motioned the lock disengage with a heavy clunk. He opened the door just wide enough to slide the Bible through. 1 foot crossed the threshold. Technically inside, but he kept his way. T on his back leg, ready to retreat. Here, he said, sliding the Bible across the floor toward her. Forgive me, he thought, as the book kicked up dust from the concrete to cover. Likely scratched. It stopped dead center. Emily swung her legs off the bed, touching the ground tentatively with her toes. Her eyes locked on John's, deep brown eyes, no longer full of sadness, but something else, something predatory. He should leave. John knew this. Somewhere deep down his conscience was screaming that something was keeping him from hearing, keeping him still where he stood without breaking her gaze from John. Emily moved towards the book, crouching beside it, her left hand hovering over the leather. She couldn't touch the book. None of them could. Sacred objects repelled them, yet here she was, hand within an inch of it. Impossible, yes. The word came from John's mouth, but he hadn't meant to speak. Why had he said that? Pain seared in his temple, terrible pain, and he slammed his eyes shut. A moment passed. The pain subsided. When he opened his eyes again, Emily was holding the book, fingers curled arrow on the leather spine, looking thoughtfully at the cover. John stood, frozen. Emily looked up, noticing John as if for the first time. She gasped. Eyes widened. She jerked back. Bible falling from her hands, John pulled the door close. The lock engaged, solid, final. John walked back down the corridor, whistling Frere Jacques as he went. By the time he had hated back to the office, it was 6:37 a.m. Dormez-vous. At his desk, he stared at the computer screen. His inbox showed one new message. He opened it. Subject: Emily Kant. Case file. Urgent. Body. Sorry it's late, John. This one got complicated fast. Full report attached. This isn't like the others. Fr. Michaels, he clicked. The file loaded slowly. Text appear. Headline by line. Subject. Amlicati. Entity. Classification. Class 4. Events. Blended bleach and vinegar in chemistry class. Poisoning 17 children and the teacher. Subsequently levitated, clinging to the corner of the classroom ceiling, waiting for the next class to begin. John sat back. The leather creaked. The monitors showed Emily on her bed, the Bible on the floor where she dropped it. She was curled in the corner, shaking. He watched her for a long time. At 7:31 a.m., Derek arrived, his ginger hair brushing the door frame as he entered. Morning, John. John didn't reply immediately. He looked at the screens, then slowly turned his head to face Derek. He smiled. Everything all right? Derek asked. Something in John's expression made him step back. Everything is dandy. Derek glanced at the monitors, then back at John. New arrival? He asked, pointing to cell 13. Yes, a dangerous one. I would recommend we leave her a few weeks to settle in. Best not to approach, no matter how much she shouts. Yeah, no problem. Derek shifted his weight. John began gathering his things, his movements stiff. He pulled on his jacket. What happened to your coat? Derek asked, noticing the burn mark. Oh, it's nothing. John walked toward the door. Hey, aren't you supposed to stay? That inspector's coming. Dr. Voss. John paused in the doorway, tilted his head, considering. She understand, he said. The morning air was cold, crisp, Scottish autumn settling in. John got in his car, started the engine. The dashboard clock read 7:49 a.m. He checked the rearview mirror. His reflection smiled back. Story 4, V.L. Vens. From the depths of the damp limestone cave, a fine vintage was selected. The cellar master carefully decanted out the caramel amber liquid away from the coagulated sediments. I chuckled at the ceramo. And why has it reminded me of a monocled mad scientist? The oversized beaker, iron apparatus that cradled the mold-covered Jeroboam. A reeded silver funnel lined with a virgin handkerchief and a vigil candle below the bottle's neck. Hell of a ritual just for a drink. I fiddled with the Solutrean flint pendant around my neck. Out of boredom, a glass of this a day keeps us forever young, the chateau's patriarch boasted. His premier cru poulet was then graciously poured into crystal glasses for the cloaked and masked village elites. Santy, to the harvest. We toasted. The wine was potent like fire. My legs felt like a freshly baked gâteau de ménage. My vision turned hazy and gray like the morning mist. The vortex of intoxication spiraled me to the ground. I was out, cold, sudden shaking of my surroundings, and the pulsating metallic vibrato woke me from my drunken slumber. How long was I out? Disoriented with my head pounding. I tried looking for my glasses. There was no light. Complete darkness, other than a faint red light seeping through by my feet. The noxious smell of sulfur and diesel, as well as the creaky sound of old springs, brought me to a terrifying realization. Wait, is this a trunk? In the dark, tight space I would fee, and the main culprit of my discomfort. I was lying on top of a spare tire, the rim jammed into my rib cage with each bump from the road. The exhaust fumes were suffocating. I began to scream and kick, thrashed around to get myself free, but then realized that my hands and legs were bound tightly. I desperately tried to bite onto my flint necklace to cut the rope around my legs. The car suddenly came to a screeching halt. Footsteps, the trunk door creaked open, and there was a dark figure illuminated by the red brake lights that stood over me. Before I could react, I was clobbered with a blotto. DJCT. I was out cold once again. I awoke to being thrown down a dirt pit below the century-old vines. You'll become a fine vintage. One of the cloaked figures above, he ground, said reassuringly. They began to shovel soil over me as I desperately tried to keep my face from being buried. Thousands of gnarly, serpent-like rhizomes constricted my limp body, piercing skin, slithe, red into any opening my body had, and found my arteries. I tried to scream, but my mouth, my nose, and my ears were all infiltrated by dirt and these pulsating subterranean plant stems. Then finally a pair of barbed roots plunged through my sockets, through my skull. Darkness. They began their feast, painfully draining my life force. Being part of the vines now, it was a different feeling. I knew I was dead, and yet, strangely, I felt more alive. I felt everything. I saw everything. I heard everything. I tasted everything. I now had the ability to be everywhere all at once. All I had to do was extend my roots deeper, wider, further. I have gotten stronger with each passing day. I will wreak vengeance eventually. The problem was speed. Even with my newfound powers, I could not transfer my nourishment to growth fast enough. There wasn't much more sustenance I could extract from my old husk of a body, nor from snacking on all of the burrowing rodents, rootworm larvae, and phylloxera eggs. I needed more to eat, something more substantial. I began to set bigger traps. My vines grew with curved, jagged thorns, so when the vineyard workers would come by in January to prune, they would bleed on to me. In February, I altered the mustard greens that I allowed to flourish in between my vines to have leaves as sharp as razor blades, thorny branches, and their roots to have anticoagulant toxins. Oh, how I relished every whimpering and cries of pain. Their blood stained my soul, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more. I had a hankering for something to chew on. The chateau, where I had my very last drink, and where that trickster patriarch resided, was on the other side of the Salters Massif. As spring arrived, I took advantage of the warming days to have all my serrated branches swell, revealing sprigs of bright maroon. I so rushed up the rock mountain, wrapping around it bit by bit from underground. As the seasons progressed, so did my plan for retribution. The Salter Mountain area was also a destination in location, as well as where the village farmers herded their sheep. I made certain to lay my traps of softened salt, with my hooked roots yanking in anything down for me to feast on. I smothered and drained everything along the way. Consider it a toll for trampling through my land. In late May, when the sun shined the longest, my garnet-colored carnivorous flowers morphed into bullet-shaped grape clusters with a mahogany hue. Just coming in contact with them caused blisters and scarring. I gleefully relished the fear and suffering I was causing the vineyard. the sleepy town in southern Burgundy was up in arms about the influx of unexplainable attacks, deaths, and disappearance of their loved ones all around the vineyard's property. Insurance skyrocketed. Visitors stopped. Decoming business struggled. Even the country's appellation control threatened the chateau, stripping their prestigious status. If my wild vines weren't maintained, not a chance. The autumn season came, where all my crimson red grapes were ripe for the harvest. Yet no one dared to pick them, no matter how much the vineyard offered in payment. My grapes began to rot on the vine, emitting putrid, repugnant fumes that traveled around the neighboring towns of Vergesson, as well as Devey, and made all of the villagers ill. The festering juices also made the soil toxic and uninhabitable for anything else but me. My ground assault asphyxiated and devoured everything in my path. Each day, my roots gained more ground, getting closer to the chateau. In response, the patriarch hired contractors to uproot my vines. Oh, they want to control me. Is this their idea of retaliation? They will face the full force of my invasion. His yearning for vitality and prosperity ran deep, but my hate and my roots run deeper. My final plan was underway. Patriarch's goons attempted to set me aflame, and as some of my grapes burst and sizzled, I tightened my roots, contorting all around a central area. I pushed and pulled, tugged and jacked. Finally, there was a thunderous crackle above on top of the Solter Mountains. With the ground shaking, the lime rock peak gave way. As the mountain crumbled downward, they clustered and gained speed. Like a tsunami of unstoppable earth, it completely obliterated and buried everything in their path. The chateau and the village around it were below ground. My roots found the immobilized and began our feast. No salvation, no forgiveness. Simultaneously, I scoured below the rubble and earth in search of the patriarch. I finally found him sheltering under a flimsy table in the corner of his limestone cellar cave. My roots broke through the cracked wall and sprawled throughout the arched ceilings like Bastille Day fireworks. My rhizomes proceeded to contort and crush each pillar, which threatened to collapse the cellar inside. But death will not be quick for him. I was just getting started. I needed him to know that his winery's failure, the accident-prone harvest, the missing staff and villagers, and the mountain coming down, these were not your average natural disasters, global warming, or some other series of unfortunate events. It was all me, the one that he has sacrificed. My pikestaff roots harpooned through the brick floors where he crouched and skewered through his heel, his Achilles, and dug into his pathetically old calves. He screamed in agony. The roots continued to drill through to his shoulder blades and forced the old man to sprout upwards, smashing his head through the table of safety. In the process, I needed him to be standing for what came next. In front of him, I had my thorny vines manifest, a bundle of husk in my former image as a human. Round the neck, I slid around my old leaf-shaped Solutrean pendant. I could see his horror in realization of who or what I am. Yes, you fool, you made me into this. If I could laugh triumphantly, I would, however. The best this cursed Vitus vinifera could do is shake the ground with great exultation, just the way these vines and roots ravaged me last harvest, I would do the same to him. I will not have some hired thugs to do the dirty deed as this coward did. A glass a day keeps us forever young, right? I drained him painfully slow for months in a world-renowned viticultural region known for their elegant white Chardonnays. My thirst for bloody revenge has created the region's first ruby-hued concoction. It became highly sought after by enophiles and world leaders alike. My hate was delicious to them, vintage after vintage. These fools would spend fortunes at black market auctions to obtain my wines that they believed made the more youthful, more powerful, and interesting. Little did they know that they are now part of me. I have taken root into their shallow souls, and I would extract everything out of them. What a splendid harvest this turned out to be. Indeed. Bonsanti, Story 5. The weed made me paranoid, but I was right. The clock strikes midnight with the sound of a ledge are snapping shut, and Peter clocks in for another shift at the Hopetown Gas and Go, where the fluorescent lights hum a frequency that vibrates at the exact pitch of his guilt, and the parking lot stretches into darkness, a ninth circle of suburban hell waiting beyond the glass. And he's been doing this for 8 months now, ever since his mother got sick and he made the decision that would define Eve. Everything that came after the decision, he tells himself, was about medical bills, but knows, in the place where truth lies beneath the narratives we construct, was about something else entirely. Peter moves through the aisles with mechanical precision, his hands stocking shelves while his mind calculates the weight of the Ziploc bag in his jacket pocket. Not the pre-rolled joint he tells himself is, just to take the edge off, but the real product. The inventory he's been skimming from the back room for 3 weeks now, boxes labeled as motor oil additives that contain something that pays considerably better, something that makes the Hopetown Gas and Go less a gas station and more a distribution point. And Peter has been stealing from people who do not take kindly to theft. At 2 a.m, Peter steps out to the back loading area, where the security camera has a convenient blind spot that he's sure isn't accidental, and he lights up, pulling smoke into his lungs not for pleasure but for courage, because tonight he has taken enough product to pay for the experimental German treatment his mother's insurance deny, and the hike comes on gentle at first, then keeps going, deepening, and Peter realizes he's smoked more than he intended, but tonight the paranoia feels different, feels earned, because Peter is doing something worth being paranoid about. When he goes back inside, the fluorescent lights seem to expose him, seem to announce his guilt to anyone who might be watching, and he thinks about his mother in the hospice facility, the way she looked at him last week when he told her about the German trial, the way her face had transformed with something that might have been hope, that also might have been accusation, and she'd asked, "Where did you get the money, Peter?" And he'd lied, told her he'd been saving. But she'd known he was lying because mothers always know, and she'd asked again, slower, "What did you do a car P? All's into the lot at 217. A black sedan with tinted windows, and a woman in her mid-30s gets out wearing clothes too nice for the pressure cooker of a gas station at this hour, and she walks toward the entrance with the purposeful stride of someone who knows exactly where she's going and why, and when she comes inside, the door chime sounds like a verdict being read. She walks directly to the counter and looks at him with eyes that catalog everything, his dilated pupils, his shaking hands, the way he's positioned himself near the backroom door. And when she speaks, her voice is Kasu, all in a way that feels practiced. "You're Peter, right? Trevor's night guy. I'm looking for something specific." Trevor said, "You're very observant, notice things, patterns in inventory." Peter's heart is doing something arrhythmic and violent in his chest, and he understands with chemical-enhanced clarity that this is a test, that his manager knows exactly what Peter has been noticing, exactly what Peter has been taking. And this woman is here to determine whether Peter is a problem that needs solving or an opportunity that needs exploiting. "I notice the regular stock," Peter says. "See, carefully, motor oil, snacks, nothing special." The woman's smile doesn't change. "That's disappointing, because Trevor was very clear that you noticed the Thursday deliveries, as in the sealed boxes, the ones you've been helping yourself to." Peter makes a calculation that feels less like a decision and more like a coin flip determining whether he lives or dies. "I took 3 boxes. I needed money for my mother's treatment. I can pay it back, or I can be useful. I can move product. I'm here every night." Nobody pays attention to the graveyard shift. The woman studies him with the intensity of someone appraising merchandise, and Peter can see himself through her eyes. Desperate, compromised, already guilty, already complicit, the perfect candidate for further exploitation, because people who've crossed one line tend to find the next lines easier to cross. "You can pay it back by working it off," she says. "Stock the she-wolves, clock in, clock out. But on Thursday nights, you'll move the special inventory from the storage room to the marked cars that come through between 3 and 4. You'll keep your mouth shut. You'll be invisible, and in 6 months we'll be even. Maybe you'll even make enough extra to actually afford that German treatment. Maybe your mother gets to live a little longer." She slides a card across the counter with a phone number written on it, and just before she reaches the door, she looks back. "Trevor says your mother worked in pharmaceutical distribution before she got sick. She knows how supply chains work. Interesting coincidence. Makes me wonder what she might have taught you." The door chimes as she leaves, and Peter stands there holding the card, and the implication lands on him with the weight of a building collapsing. His mother's career, his mother's knowledge, his mother's illness happening right around the time the special Thursday deliveries started, and he's thinking about the question she asked him, "What did you do?" and wondering if it was accusatory or if it was something else, if it was a mother recognizing her own methodology in her son. He sits on the concrete floor of the storage room and pulls out his phone, opens the text thread with his mother, scrolls up through months of his lies about extra shift, teas and savings, and he sees her responses in a new light, the way she never quite believed him, but also never quite pushed back, the way she accepted his explanation with a resignation that might have been gratitude, but also might have been recognition. Might have been someone understanding that survival doesn't care about morality, that cancer costs more than honesty can afford. The clock jumps to 4:30, and Peter's mind races through possibilities. He could quit, he could go to the police, he could tell his mother the truth, He could refuse the woman's offer, but each option leads to a cascade of consequences that end with his mother dying sooner rather than later, with her last memory of him being disappointment. And isn't that the real horror? That love can make you complicit in things you'd never do for yourself. At 5 in the morning, a car pulls up, black sedan, different from before, and a man gets out and walks to the back entrance. See, like he's done this 100 times, and he knocks 3 times, and Peter understands this is the pattern. This is how it works. This is what Thursday nights will look like for the next 6 months or longer, or what forever must mean. Peter opens the door for the man, the tallest and fittest man Peter has seen in months, broad-shouldered and solid, in a way that makes Peter feel thin and break, able and wrong, and the man hands him a list without making eye contact. And Peter goes to the storage room with hands that shake from more than just the weed, gathering the marked boxes while thinking about how this man moves through the world with such certainty, such uncomplicated masculinity. And Peter carries the boxes out one by one, bending and lifting under the man's gaze, feeling expo set in the fluorescent light of the loading area, where to security cameras capture everything. And when Peter finished loading the trunk, the man lights a cigarette with the kind of casual ominous tea that makes Peter's chest tight, makes him aware of his own body in ways he usually suppresses, makes him think thoughts he's trained himself not to think about. Men would look like they could break him or save him or both. The man finished his cigarette with deliberate slowness, watching Peter in a way that feels like evaluation or judgment or something else Peter can't name. And then he pulls out an envelope thick with cash and hands it to Peter, and their fingers touch for a split second, and Peter's entire nervous system fires at once, arousal and shame and fear tangling into something that feels dangerous and inevitable and wrong. And the man smirks, not cruelly, but knowingly, as if he can see exactly what's happening in Peter's head, exactly what Peter wants, and hates himself for wanting. And then he gets in his car and drives away, leaving Peter standing in the loading area, holding money that feels wet and sticky somehow, even though it isn't, holding evidence of a transaction that felt like something else entirely. Peter stands there trying to steady his breathing, trying to understand why the hand that isn't holding the envelope has moved to his zipper unconsciously, the one no woman or man has touched in longer than he wants to remember. And he realizes with brutal clarity that he's not crazy, that nothing was ever wrong with him exactly, that they all made him this way. His mother, who taught him survival, has no gender and no morality. The absent father, who left him with no model for what men are supposed to be. The culture had taught him to suppress any attraction to masculine authority, even as he craves it, craves the humiliation of being small and weak and useful to men who could destroy him. And Peter understands that the paranoia isn't paranoia at all. It's just accurate perception of himself, of what he wants, of what he's willing to do. The truth doesn't damage Peter the way he thought it would, which is its own kind of damage. The way knowing you're complicit feels less like revelation and more like recognition of something that was always there, waiting to be named. And now it's too late. But such nows are always too late, and Peter knows this so completely he jokes about it without once failing to look himself dead in the mirror, dead being the operative word, and he prefers not to dwell on any of it because dwelling would require change, and change would mean he couldn't call himself a victim anymore. Fire spreads through his hands where he holds the envelope, not metaphorical fire, but the actual heat of guilt made physical, the way shame metabolizes into temperature. And fire isn't Peter, isn't capable of carelessness or mistakes the way Peter is. Fire is consequence made visible, of fatally clear, opium that never blinds you enough, which is good because the ones who don't deserve to burn always call it mercy when the burning stops. Always love the ones who burn and burn again until they understand that light born from darkness so pitch and deep it comforts the eye could never be mistaken for mercy, only for what it actually is, which is punishment that looks like warmth. The sun rises painting the parking lot in shades of pink and gold that seem obscene in their beauty, and Peter counts the money, and it's more than he makes into weeks of legitimate work, and he thinks about how easy it would be to keep doing this, how 6 months could become a year, could become a career, how the line between son trying to save his mother and someone trying to save himself through submission to stronger men is thinner than he ever imagined, is possibly the same line his mother crossed years ago. Peter clocks out at 8 and walks to his car with the envelope in his jacket pocket, and he doesn't call his dealer, doesn't plan his next escape, but he also doesn't call the police, doesn't confess, doesn't choose the clear moral path because the clear moral path leads to his mother dying with the knowledge that her son would have saved her but chose not to. And Peter understands now that the real trap isn't the graveyard shift or the addiction or even the criminal enterprise. The real trap is love. 'Tis the way caring about someone gives them the power to make you complicit in your own corruption. He drives to the hospice facility because he needs to see her, needs to understand what she knew, and when she knew it. And when he arrives, his mother is awake, propped up in bed, looking smaller than she did yesterday, and when she sees him, her face does something complicated, something that might be relief, or might be recognition, or might be the expression of someone who's been waiting for this conversation. Peter sits in the chair beside her bed without taking out his phone, without distraction, and before anything can crack open in his chest, he puts the envelope on the blanket between them, and his mother looks at it and then at him, and she doesn't ask what it is because she knows, and Peter says, "You knew about Hopetown, about what it actually is, and it's not a question." His mother's hand reaches out and touches the envelope with fingers that shake from more than just illness, and when she speaks her voice is clear. "I helped set it up 5 years ago. Before I got sick, Trevor needed someone who understood pharmaceutical distribution. I thought I'd do it for a year, get out clean, then I got diagnosed. Then the insurance denied coverage. Then I understood that the money I'd made helping poison other people wasn't enough to save myself." Peter feels something in his chest that isn't breaking because breaking implies it was whole before, and what's happening is more like recognition, more like understanding that it was never whole, that he was raised in a house where survival meant flexibility, where love meant teaching your child how to navigate systems, both legal and illegal, where the greatest gift a parent could give was the knowledge that morality is contextual and survival is absolute. "I'm sorry I taught you this," she says, her hand covering his. "I'm not sorry you learned it." Does that make sense? Peter thinks about the next 6 months of Thursday nights and the man with the cigarette who will return week after week. Thinks about becoming someone he can't disapprove of because his mother can't disapprove from beyond death. Thinks about how the German treatment might give her another year, but won't give him back the person he was before he understood what love actually costs, and he realizes the high has worn off completely, that he's experiencing this moment with brutal, unmedicated clarity, that his paranoia was never paranoia at all, but accurate perception of a reality that most people have the luxury of not seeing. No, Peter tells her it doesn't make sense at all. She smiles, and it's the saddest smile Peter has ever seen. Good. When it starts making sense, that's when you've lost something you can't get back. Peter stays until visiting hours end, and when he leaves he drives not home, but back to Hopetown Gas and Go. And he parks in the lot and thinks about the woman's card in his pocket, about the phone number he hasn't called yet, about the decision he still has to make, even though he knows the decision has already been made, was made the moment he opened that first Thursday box, was made when his mother taught him to see systems instead of rules, was made before he was born, and the choices his mother made that created the circumstances that created him. And Peter understands with pharmaceutical clarity that this is inheritance, this is legacy, this is what it means to love someone enough to become complicit in their survival and your own corruption. The clock on his dashboard reads to 17, which is impossible because it's afternoon, but Peter looks again, and it still says to 17, and he realizes the clock has been broken for weeks, and he never noticed because time stopped meaning anything the night he decided to steal from people who kill thieves. And broken time seems appropriate somehow, seems like the perfect metaphor for a life that doesn't move forward or backward but just exists in this perpetual moment of decision and consequence, of love and corruption, of mother and son, and the drug that doesn't keep them apart at all. T binds them together in a complicity so complete that saving her means losing himself. Peter pulls out his phone and dials the number on the card, and when the woman answers, he says, "I am in," and she says, "I know," and Peter understands that she always knew, that his mother always knew, that the only person who didn't know was him, and now he does. And the knowledge doesn't set him free, it just makes him complicit, makes him conscious, makes him exactly what the graveyard shift was always designed to produce. Someone awake enough to see the truth and broken enough to live with it. End. Story 6. But I'm not from Jersey or the devil. Are you ready to get started? Kelsey asked, leaning forward and putting her elbows on the round coffee table that was placed between her and Tim in the hotel suite. A ring light and a camera faced each of them across the table, providing a perfect front-facing camera shot for Kelsey and her interview subject. "As ready as I can be," Tim said, adjusting himself to try and get comfortable in his chair given his cloven hoof legs and tail wedged through the back of the seat. The light was bright enough to squint, but he knew his eyes would adjust momentarily. "Then let's be famous," Kelsey exclaimed as she hit the record button on her remote. A red LED light illuminated on the top of the camera, letting them both know it was showtime. Kelsey put on her best girl next door smile and began her live stream. "Hi fans. It's time for Kelsey Levin's Fantastic Seven show. This week I am here in beautiful Atlantic City at Firkin, giving you 7 interviews with 7 fantastic people and asking 7 deep questions to the most eye-catching people attending this convention. She paused to moisten her lips and catch her breath. I've got the most amazing guest today. The legend, the myth, the Jersey Devil. Tim looked at her, his eyes crossed momentarily, reminding himself that he volunteered to do this. Thank you, Kelsey. But just to clarify things from the start, I'm not originally from Jersey, and I'm not the devil. Somehow, Kelsey managed an even bigger smile and quick laugh before looking at the camera to say, "Of course not, sweetie," while simultaneously winking at the camera. "What would you like us to call you then?" Tim smiled his best, which was magnitudes smaller than what Kelsey could radiate. "Let's just go with Tim. It probably rolls off the tongue a little easier for your viewers." She leaned over the table, placing her hand on his claw-like fingers to placate him with an "of course." "Now, let's get started with those fantastic questions." She didn't notice her own unconscious effort to quickly remove her hand from the cold scales where she expected to feel fabric or other material used to make costumes. Tim continued his weak smile, ready for the worst. Question number 1. What is it like to be he youngest of 13 brothers and sisters? Tim coughed out a laugh and sat up, smiling for real as he began his reply. "Now, Kelsey, you can't believe everything that has been written about Emmy. No, I'm not the 13th child of Mother Leeds that got wished into a devil. I mean, sure, I can understand after a mother in the 1700s had 12 kids and got pregnant again. I think even someone as charming as you, Kelsey, would wish the same." They both shared a short laugh at this observation. "No, with someone like me, you can clearly see that I was a middle child. I have an older domineering sister and a younger, rather favored, bratty brother. It was just me in the middle, trying to make mother and father happy to no avail." Kelsey stuck out her bottom lip with a frown to the sympathy. Tim did his best to appear to be warmed by her concern as he wiped a non-existent tear from the corner of his eye, knowing both of them were complete frauds of emotion. "Bless your heart, Tim. So, on to question 2. Her emotion pivoted on a dime, back to the perky brunette ready to capture more viewers. The Pine Barrens just got approved to build a 3,000-house subdivision and a food court with 4 famous chains, which viewers, I'd mention their names if they sponsored my program, but they know who they are and they all know how to find Kelsey Levin. Will this be good or bad for your hometown? Tim's smile turned into a bit of a sneer, baring his yelling fangs before correcting himself into something a little less menacing. "I'd just like to say that the Burlington County Commissioners are all fools. They should keep the woods as they are. There are plenty of other places to build tract housing in. Leave those people alone." He paused for a moment, then continued, "I mean, I'm not originally from that area, but I did adopt it as my home over the past years." Kelsey shifted in her chair, switching her crossed ankle from left to right. "Well, I didn't mean to get you riled up, but I'm afraid this next one might." Tim braced himself. He hoped she did not continue down this path talking about his beloved woods. "Taylor and Travis, what do you think?" Tim genuinely lit up. "I know," he nearly shouted. I cannot believe that Taylor went for a football player. They don't have a chance. She lines be touring. He'll be going city to city all season. As I see it, she be playing the halftime show singing a new #1 song about their colossal breakup. Tim found himself breathing a little heavy but tried to calm himself. Travis was so wrong for his favorite artist. Kesley was hanging on every word, thinking to herself that this costume, men gushing over Taylor Swift, was going to be gold for her viewership. She hoped that she could splice this out and get the clip to go viral. Who would have thought the Jersey Devil would be a Swiftie? Kelsey, Tim interrupted. Sorry, we know you're not from Jersey. But hey, getting back to you, can you do the blood-curdling scream they say you have for our viewers? Tim sat back in his chair, contemplating whether he should for a moment, and said, Why no, dear, that would curdle your blood. The interview will be over, and I'd have to call 911 for you to go to the hospital. I'd much prefer to get to your next question. Well played, Tim. We don't want that to happen. But tell me, just Kelsey talking to Tim here and 120,000 of my closest friends. Your suit is impeccable. I don't even see a seam on it. Who made it? Tim chuckled. I guess you could say my parents made it. Oh, do they do other styles of suits too? Do they have a booth here? No. See, they don't make them anymore. When you're making a suit for each of your 13 kids, it gets hard on the arthritis, you know. Tim gave a hearty laugh. Kelsey a little less so, as she was trying to digest the previous statement about being a middle child, but she had to keep moving so she could get to her final signature question. Okay, only 2 more to go. Question 6. Do you prefer camping, glamping, or a hotel stay? Tim grinned, reminiscing at his time in the Pineys. Oh, I would have to say camping. There is nothing like being outdoors, staying out all night long, feeling the wind caress your fur and the sound of wildlife. You would really be surprised how busy the Pineys are at night with the activity of every creature, great and small, living and dying. Kelsey's face went blank for just a split second, again trying to figure out who or what it was she was talking to. But at this point, she wanted to finish up and go. Last question, Tim, then you're free to go back to the wonderful Atlantic City Firkin convention. It might be the toughest question yet, tougher than Taylor and Travis. Tim asked, his left eyebrow going up. It might be. So what is your favorite cocktail? Tim sat and thought for a good 5 seconds of dead air. Tim, sorry, I got lost in thinking about all the drinks I've had. I think my favorite would just be a simple wine called Muselli's from China. It is quite a delicious red. Tim's internal monologue added to the end of the thought, especially when the red is with lamb's blood added at the appropriate moment, which only the viewer have the skill to do properly. Yay. Thank you so much, Tim. I'd like to thank you for the interview, and for all my wonderful viewers out there. Make sure you share this video, stream, and get your friends to subscribe. The pleasure was mine, Kelsey. We should do this again, of course. So y'all, my next stream will be in 7 hours with Malcolm Bridge, one of the blackjack dealers here at the hotel. See you soon. Kelsey raised up the remote and shut off the cameras. The red lights blinked off. She stood up and immediately began folding in the telescopic legs of the camera tripods. then carefully placing them in the vinyl carrying case. When she was done packing, she glanced at her phone and turned to Tim, still sitting in the chair at tea. I really appreciate your interview. I already saw a ton of comments about the interview. My followers absolutely love your costume. So really, where did you get it? It's so real, like scary real. Tim stared at her, contemplating her intentions. If you must know, he said softly, leaning towards her, it's a custom build from Syzygy for suits. Truly, those guys are masters of the craft. Kelsey warmed up at the admission that it really was just a suit. You should have said so on the stream. Those guys could be famous. They like to keep it private. But, Kelsey, I'm afraid I need to get back to the convention floor. Everyone wants a picture with the Jersey Devil. Even if you're not from Jersey, even that I'm not from Jersey, it will be a secret between us and your thousands of followers, dear. He popped out of the chair and grabbed her bag for her, ushering her towards the door. His right claw accidentally ripped the seam on the back of her blouse as he pushed her forward. Tim noticed, but Kelsey did not. He was just relieved it did not open a wound. As soon as the door shut, Tim went to the mini refrigerator and the kitchenette of his suite. He opened the door and pulled out one of the glass quart-sized bottles in the fridge. Shutting the door, he returned to the living room. He stretched out his leathery wings to their full length, nearly touching the walls on either side of the room. Opening the bottle, he tilted back his head and proceeded to gulp down the fresh goat blood and for large swallows. And he was done. He wiped mouth with a napkin. There was no need to be a savage and stain his fur-covered chin this early in the day. He looked at the time and decided to go ahead and get back to the convention floor. Humans and their obsessions with the furries were a perfect cover for him to mingle with the humans and search for his next human meal. Story 7. Ghost Writer. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness at 11:40 p.m., illuminating the place's rich history. Thunder cracked the sky open. Lightning's white-hot veins ripped through black clouds, and the air tore. Ned electric with imminent rain. Grant tugged at his jacket, caught in the door's grip. Rust flaked from the hinges as the frame wobbled precariously with each pull. Following behind him, Dee's purple hair caught the dim light as she moved around him, heading for the next room. She pulled her phone out of her pocket, ready to capture the echoes of the past. Right here, she spared, her black-painted thumbnail tapping the screen as she took a picture of the corner of the room. The floorboards beneath them creaked, old wood giving slightly wear. Decades before, a chair had worn for circles into the grain. She didn't notice how the dust swirled differently there, how the temperature dropped 3 degrees in that spot, or how the peeling Victorian wallpaper curled away and the wall as if still responding to the heat of candles long extinguished. Grant's breath clouded in front of his face as he came up behind her. He pulled out an EMF meter from his pocket, its small lights blinking red, then green, and finally yellow in rapid succession. The flashlight beam wavered across his knuckles, casting elongated shadows of his fingers against the wall. 6 degrees, he whispered as he pocketed the device. The flashlight in his hand sent a beam dancing across water stains that spread like bruises on the far wall. The history book showed a sepia photograph of Sophia Monet seated right there at her desk, candlelight casting shadows across her face as she penned her famous horror story, Sigh. Can you imagine her in 1850, ink stain, fingers racing across parchment, while outside women couldn't even vote? How rebellious her mind was, how utterly contemporary. She shook her head. She was born in the wrong century, trap, paid in corsets. All her imagination wandered, unrestricted. She never wanted to leave Paris, but her father owned companies here in the States, so she had no choice. 6 months after their arrival, her father died. Sophia became the invisible signature behind the business, a woman accountable but unseen. Grant's voice caught on the title, The Bell by the Gravestone, as goosebumps prickled up his forearms. He was stunned that a woman had crafted such a horrifying story. Her words cut through Victorian hypocrisy with surgical precision, exposing a society where ladies swooned at coarse language while their husbands frequented brothels, where marriage swallowed a woman's fortune whole, and where the same world that worshipped female innocence turned a blind eye to its violation. How daring she was to write a tale of a woman's premature burial, of desperate cries that rang the grave bell, while no one listened. No one came. She wrote in this room because of the fireplace. Deet turned to the massive Gothic monument, a hand-carved granite structure that dominated the wall. Stone cherubs with eroded features gazed at them, their once detailed faces nearly smooth, dead by the relentless passage of time. The fireplace yawned open like a dragon's mouth, large enough to roast an entire deer, its mantle still bearing the faint scratches where she had once carved her initials. Look, Dee said excitedly as she took a picture of the scratches. She did that after her first book was published. Thunder growled in the distance, a warning from the sky that had yet to deliver its promised downpour. They're taking forever, Grant muttered as he started towards the front door. The device in his pocket vibrated, prompting him to pull it out and examine it. Behind him, silver light spilled through the cracks of the wooden panel covering the window, catching on dust particles that danced like dragonflies. The shadow descended the almost fragmentary staircase, each unheard step representing her solitude. She wore a high collar gown, a cinched waist, and a skirt that pooled like ink at her feet. As she reached the bottom of the staircase, she tilted her head, eyes narrowing as they traced the line of Grant's shoulders down to his hands. His eyes were on the device, oblivious to her presence. Her form was translucent, a supernatural figure that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Lilacs, sweet, intoxicating, not likely to bloom in November, saturated the air. Grant's nostrils flared as the scent surrounded him. "Dee, you wearing perfume?" He turned, shining the flashlight towards her as she stepped into the foyer, shaking her head. Her nostrils flared slightly as she searched the air, but the delicate floral fragrance was gone. She stepped behind Grant, her cell phone flashlight cutting through the darkness. "What's taking them so long?" she asked, making no effort to hide her impatience. "It's Eddie, isn't it?" Sophia's Victorian dress rustled without sound as she drifted closer to the living intruders. Her eyes narrowed at the way the purple-strawn Dee's hair caught the light, foreign and fascinating, like some exotic flower painted into her hair, not placed. Hovering near them made her form ripple with discomfort. The warmth of their living bodies pulled at something deep within her, a hunger, a memory She reached out as if to pet the purple strands, but didn't make contact. She concentrated, drawing energy from airy equipment until the flashlights flickered and died, and the phone powered down. Grant muttered a curse as his fingers closed around the extra pair of batteries in his pocket, jabbed at the POW. Our button on her phone, her frustration mounting as the black screen remained lifeless. Nothing, she muttered, completely dead. Adelaide appeared out of the darkness, the starch-white call, Laura of her chambermaid uniform catching the light, her apron hung without a wrinkle, pinned precisely at the waist. Her shoes clicked on the floor, but were not heard as she walked past Grant and Dee. She followed Sophia, who drifted into the next room. Her translucent form cast no shadow on the walls or floor. A chill preceded Chester's arrival, the temperature dropping several degrees before he materialized through the wall. His white-gloved hands remained folded at his waist, his spine ruler straight as he glided across the floorboards without disturbing the sentry of dust. Beneath him, Sophia's fingers traced the frayed velvet of her chair before sinking into it. Outside, laughter filtered through the cracked window. Chester adjusted his position beside her, the phantom fabric of his bow tie catching non-existent light, the knot still impeccably centered below his high collar. Sophia's fingers drummed against the armrest as Adelaide now stood behind her chair. "Why don't you scare them off?" Adelaide murmured as she glanced at Chester. "They've been out there for hours," he said with a sigh. "I saw them from upstairs and was hoping the approaching storm would scare them off." Eddie's breath fogged in the frigid air of the foyer as he shuffled in, the metal legs of his tripod scraping against the floor. His eyes darted to the shadowy corners where the ceiling met the walls, then back to Jet and Cal, whose arms were laden with equipment coming into the house. Grant's EMF meter shrieked to life, its lights lashing the darkness. He froze mid-breath as Ada walked over to him, staring at the meter in his hand. Unkempt blonde hair framed his face, a tattoo stark against his neck. Chester shook his head as he studied the group. Look at them. Rumpled clothes, messy hair. It is like they rolled straight out of bed, never glancing at a mirror. Sophia's gaze locked on to the taller man standing behind the others. The ghost of her Parisian accent surfaced like an old remembrance as she spoke. "The world has changed since our time." His shoulder-length dark hair was gathered in a careless man bun that somehow enhanced rather than diminished the sharp angles of his jaw. When he turned, his eyes caught the light, not merely blue, but the precise shade of a cloudless winter sky rue. Hasty before dusk, admiration spread over her as she studied him, the first truly handsome man she'd encountered since she had taken her last breath in the year 1873. Thunder cracked overhead as Cal dropped his equipment bag, the heavy canvas striking the floor. Just as the first raindrops could be heard, the zipper rasped as he crouched down, pulling out tripods that gleamed dully in the dim light. "Last time I was here, I got 2 EVP recordings on this floor, and when I looked at my photos, orbs were hovering above a bed upstairs." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Something's here," he clucked. "Shed the cameras to his chest. 1 down here, 1 upstairs, before we go live." It was a dark and stormy night. Eddie joked with a theatrical wave toward the door. His wisecrack. Kate died in the silence that followed, withering under cold stares. Jet stepped back, arms crossed, keep those cameras away from me. Since when do you leave your editing cave? Grant's flashlight beam caught Jet's face, just flat like it. Jet's shoulders rose and fell. Tell them why you're really here, Cal said. Jet sneered. The architecture, Victorian, original foundation. I am pursuing a degree in architectural design. This house was a masterpiece of its time, with gabled roofs and narrow windows. He grabbed his camera and backed away. Are we going to start this investigation or what? He moved past Grant, heading for the living room. 3 ghostly figures watched as he entered the living room and made his way to the fireplace. He reached upward, ripping through years of den-esque cobwebs that had veiled the remnants of the portrait hanging above. The rumors had been true. It had survived all this time. Dee's gasp echoed against the high ceiling as she entered the room. Look, the portrait's gilded edge caught the moonlight. Jet smiled as Dee took off her denim jacket. She tried to wipe away the dust, but couldn't reach the painting. Famous French artist, something with an S ... double quotes, she muttered, bouncing on her toes. Jet bit his lip to suppress a laugh as he crouched, bracing himself as Dee, his younger sister, scrambled onto his shoulders, her knees digging into his collarbone. The jacket swept across the unbroken glass in frantic arcs, sending cobwebs floating like ghosts to the floorboards. Beneath the grime, a woman's face emerged, porcelain skin, dark eyes, perfect features, and a soft smile. Jet lowered himself so Dee could slide off his shoulders just as Grant entered the room with the others trailing behind. Cal aimed his camera at the portrait, the shutter clicking rapidly. A painting like this, just abandoned, Cal murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. That is unbelievable. He eyed the portrait. She was hot. Jet and Dee glared. He shrugged. What? Clock's ticking, Cal muttered, disappearing back into the foyer. Eddie and Grant exchanged a look before following. She was an extraordinary woman, Dee said, nodding toward the portrait. Rumor has it she finished another manuscript before she died. Jet's gaze lingered on the painting. It's supposedly hidden somewhere in here. Today would have been her birthday. She was 28 when consumption claimed her. Her brilliant mind trapped in a body that betrayed her one labored breath at a time. Gra-N-T bellowed her name over the thunderstorms. Assault. Dee sighed and left the room. Jet reached into his pocket, fingers closing around soft petals. He glanced over his shoulder, making sure nobody was watching. He then placed a small bundle of violets, slightly crushed, from his pocket on the mantel. With a quick sweep of his hand, he brushed a fine layer of dust over them. One writer to another, he whispered, "Happy birthday, Ms. Monet." The trio of ghosts exchanged astonished glances. A gentleman, after all, Chester murmured, his spectral eyes following Jet with newfound respect. Perhaps humanity isn't entirely lost on this generation. Adelaide's translucent form shimmered with excitement. May I give them a proper fright? Sophia smiled as she inclined her head. A scare, yes, but no harm, she instructed, gesturing for Chester to accompany her maid. After they drifted through the wall, Sophia abandoned her chair and glided silently toward Jet, who swept his flashlight beam across the room. Moonlight played across the sharp angles of his face, casting his features in silver and shadow, as if nature itself couldn't decide whether to reveal or conceal his good looks. The lean muscles of his forearms flexed beneath his jacket. She floated beside him, close enough that, had she been corporeal, she would have felt the living heat radiating from his skin, a feeling she hadn't experienced in over a century, a forgotten sensation that made her ghostly form tremble with longing. He walked back toward the fireplace, Fliss, light beam moving across the mantel. The violets he'd placed there rose into the air, suspended by invisible fingers. Jet's breath caught in his throat. The air shimmered, coalescing into the translucent outline of a woman. Her eyes, the same knowing eyes from the portrait, fixed on his legs turned to stone, his mouth open, but no sound emerged. One of the cherub carvings on the fireplace rotated with a grinding of ancient mechanisms. A small compartment at the base clicked open, revealing yellowed pages bound with faded ribbon. The ghost's transparent finger extended toward the hidden treasure, her expression a mix of pleading and hope. "Take it and let my words live again," she whispered. "Find your voice through mine." Jet's fingers trembled as they closed around the brittle manuscript. The paper felt warm, as if it had absorbed the sun's heat despite being hidden in darkness for decades. He tucked it inside his jacket, her form dispersed like morning mist. "Wait." His hand reached through empty air. "I haven't had a birthday gift for a very long time." Her voice echoed inside his skull, intimate as a lover's whisper. "Thank you." The high-pitched wail tore through the air. Jet's muscles tensed, and his body spun around. Cal's face had gone chalk-white, fingers already fumbling with the camera and bags as he looked toward Jet. "We're getting out of here," he screamed. Something grabbed Eddie and pushed him to the ground. He dashed out the door into the rain. Grant dropped his flashlight, and it rolled down the stairs before him. He stumbled back to pick it up, its beam swinging wildly across the walls. Dee shoved past Grant and burst through the door. Rain swallowed her silhouette as she fled down the overgrown path, each step distancing her from what she had just witnessed. Eddie's feet thundered down the stairs, face pale as milk. "It doesn't like me." His eyes darted over his shoulder with terror as he looked back at Jet. He tumbled forward, sprawling across weathered porch boards, then scrambled up, disappearing into the rain. Jet turned back toward the living room. She stood where nothing had been seconds before, clutching the violets whose petals trembled though no breeze stirred them. "Thank you," Jet whispered, backing away before turning to flee. Chester's form coalesced beside her, translucent edges solidifying the manuscript. His eyebrow arched as she inclined her head. "And if his writing proves ... inadequate?" "It won't. Can't you see, he's a romantic." Sophia's fingers caressed the violet petals. She drifted upward, passing Adelaide, who loomed at the landing, her smile slicing across her face like a wound, eyes gleaming with the savage triumph of a predator who'd just drawn first blood. The air around her vibrated with the electric thrill of her unspoken confession. Sophia's head swayed in gentle disapproval as she floated past her. Seasons bled into one another, an endless procession. Paranormal investigators continued to come and go, oblivious to Sophia and her spectral companions, who watched with disinterest of all who had entered her home. A single soul is all she wanted to see again. "He's returned," Adelaide said as she floated through a wall one autumn evening. Sophia's hand froze halfway through a brush stroke. Suspended above hair that cascaded to her waist, the ghostly brush slipped through her fingers, vanishing, while her tresses twisted upward, forming the elaborate Victorian coiffure she always wore. She glided out of the room, looking over the banister below. Jet's flashlight beam cut through dust as he headed for the living room. Sophia was counting the silver threads in his dark hair that hadn't been there years ago. She drifted down, stopping in the living room doorway as he placed 3 leather-bound books on the mantel. His fingertips lingered over them for a moment as his eyes searched the room. 3 bestsellers from your manuscript, he said, voice cracking on the second word. The binding made a soft pop as he opened to the dedication page and read out loud for Sophia, who whispered inspiration in my ear. She floated into the room, standing beside him as she read the dedication. As Jet turned away, she concentrated until the air around her thickened and solidified. Digging up the past, she read the title out loud. Jet froze mid-step, then turned. She lifted the books, feeling their weight, for just a moment before both and she faded like mist. The words escaped Jet's lips like a confession. "I felt bad for taking your manuscripts," he whispered, "but your vision consumed me. The writing flowed as if guided by your hand." His eyes searched for her, but finding nothing, he sighed and headed for the door. "You're my ghostwriter now," came Sophia's voice. Hovering just behind him, he turned to find her translucent form shimmering in the dim light, her smile tinged with ironic amusement. Before she faded into nothingness, the weight that had pressed against his chest for months finally lifted.